Decades on this bench, and I believed I had seen every shade of human nature there was. Liars who never blink. Tears of last-minute remorse that arrive precisely when they are most useful. Lives ground down by circumstance and by the deliberate cruelty of people with more power than conscience. But when case file 30422B landed on my desk on a bleak Tuesday morning in November, I had no idea I was about to witness one of the most revealing cases of my career. Not a murder, not a robbery. On paper, a minor civil dispute over an employment contract. What unfolded behind that paper made my blood run cold in a way I rarely allow myself to feel from this bench. The clock read 9:15 in the morning. The air in the room was heavy, possibly from the freezing rain hammering the windows outside. The doors opened, and Sarah Miller walked in. She looked considerably older than the 28 years listed in her file. Her coat was thin and frayed at the wrists, no match for the cold outside. Her eyes were hollow, carrying the weight of nights without sleep. She was not holding a briefcase. She carried a worn handbag stuffed with crumpled documents and medicine bottles, and she gripped the railing as she walked, her hands shaking as though letting go might cause her to fall. She moved like a woman who had reached the absolute outer edge of what a human being can endure and was still somehow standing. Then the plaintiff arrived, and the contrast silenced the room. Behind Sarah came Richard Sterling, CEO of Sterling Logistics, one of the largest transport companies in the state, flanked by two attorneys whose suits cost more than Sarah's family would see in a year. He walked in like a man who had never once bowed his head to anyone. A gold watch caught the light as he pulled out his phone and began scrolling, bored, as though appearing in my courtroom was an inconvenience he had scheduled between more important things. "Your Honor," his lead attorney said, smooth and precise, "we are here to request enforcement of a breach of contract penalty, $5,000 against Ms. Sarah Miller." That number hung in the air. I looked at Sarah and watched the color leave her face. For a man like Sterling, $5,000 was the cost of a client dinner. Looking at Sarah's worn shoes, I understood it was something considerably more consequential. "Mr. Sterling," I said, lowering my voice enough to make him look up from the phone, "I see you are suing your former employee for breaching a training contract and leaving without notice. Put the phone away and explain to me why you are so determined to pursue a woman who is standing in front of you trembling." He sighed, theatrical, condescending, and slid the phone into his jacket. "Judge Judy," he said, in the tone of a man accustomed to directing 500 people, "the law is the law. She signed a contract. We invested money training her. It is documented in writing. If she quits before 6 months without cause, she repays the training costs and lost revenue. She walked off her shift on our single busiest day of the year and shut down the entire line. I run a business, not a charity. Let this pass, and every one of my 500 employees will believe they can walk out whenever they please." His argument was clean, logical, and missing exactly one thing. "Humanity. Ms. Miller," I said, turning to her, "Mr. Sterling says you left your post and caused damage to the company. Would you like to tell me why?" Sarah pulled a crumpled hospital document from her bag. Her hands trembling so visibly, the paper rustled loudly in the silence. "Your Honor, I did not want to quit. That job was everything I had to feed my child. But that morning, my daughter Emily..." She stopped, her hand over her mouth. "What about Emily?" I asked quietly. "She is 4 years old, Your Honor. She has acute leukemia. That morning her school called. She had collapsed, blood pouring from her nose that would not stop. She was in an ambulance headed to the intensive care unit. I called my manager. I called Mr. Sterling directly. I begged." She looked at Sterling then, not with hatred, but with the pure, crushing sorrow of someone who had expected basic human recognition and received nothing. He told me that if I walked out that door, I should not come back. Dead silence, not quiet, a vacuum. Sarah's shoulders shook with silent sobs. I looked at Sterling, expecting some crack in the surface. some signal to his lawyers to withdraw. Instead, he checked his watch, actually raised his wrist, and checked the time, as though her daughter's medical emergency was a commercial break in the film of his life. "Mr. Sterling," I said, and my voice carried a particular danger that anyone in this courtroom for long enough would recognize. "Did you hear what she just said?" "I heard her, Your Honor. And while the situation is unfortunate, it is irrelevant. Clause 4, Section B, abandonment of duties during peak hours means immediate termination and liability for damages." He tapped the document. "Everyone has a difficult story. If I made exceptions for every personal crisis, my company would stop functioning." She made a choice. That choice has a price. A chill moved through me. It was not merely that he lacked empathy, it was that he had engineered empathy out of his operations entirely and considered that an achievement. "Let me understand this clearly," I said, leaning forward. "You are telling this court that when Ms. Miller called you while her 4-year-old was bleeding uncontrollably in an ambulance, you told her that going to her dying child meant she was fired." "I told her that leaving her post violated her contract," he said. "I run a precise operation. She understood the terms. In my view, that was a resignation." "It was not a resignation," Sarah cried, fear and anger breaking through simultaneously. "I begged you. I told you I would come back for the night shift once she was stable. I told you I needed the income for chemotherapy. You told me I was easily replaceable and to get my priorities in order." "And you should have," Sterling responded without looking at her. "Honoring commitments is what priorities mean." She signed the paperwork. I picked up the crumpled hospital admission form and smoothed it carefully on my desk. Hasbro Children's Hospital. The date matched. Diagnosis: acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Condition on arrival: critical. "Mr. Sterling, this document states Emily Miller was admitted to the intensive care unit at 10:15 in the morning. Is that approximately when you claim Ms. Miller left her post?" "Around then, yes," he said. "So you are suing this woman," I continued, allowing the weight of it to fill the room, "not only for firing her during the worst moment of her life, but for $5,000 she needs to keep her child alive because she chose to hold her daughter's hand instead of packing your boxes." His attorney stood. "Your Honor, with respect, the emotional context, while tragic, does not negate the contractual obligation." "Sit down, counselor." I was not looking at him. My eyes were on Sterling. "You are clearly successful. The suit, the watch, I assume the company is profitable." "We netted $12 million last quarter," he said, and the trace of a smirk crossed his face, as though he believed I was offering him a compliment. $12 million, and here you are pursuing a single mother for $5,000? "Do you have children, Mr. Sterling?" His expression shifted for the first time. "I have a son. Boarding school." "If your son was in an ambulance," I said, my voice rising steadily, bleeding, calling for you, "and you were in a meeting, would you stay in the meeting or would you burn the building down to reach him?" "That is different," he said. "I own the company. I make the rules. She is an employee, a cog in the machine. Cogs do not get to decide when the machine stops." A sound moved through the gallery. Even his lawyers examined their desks. He had said the thing out loud that was meant to remain unspoken. He had confirmed that to him, Sarah Miller was not a person. She was a replaceable component, to be discarded when inconvenient. I looked at Sarah. She had stopped crying. She was staring at Sterling with total defeat, as though somewhere in herself she had begun to believe him. "Mr. Sterling," I said, a strange calm settling over me, "in this courtroom, we do not deal with cogs. We deal with human beings, and you appear to have lost track of the distinction. You came in here believing this was an arithmetic problem. Breach plus damages equals payment. You made a fundamental error in your calculation. You assumed the law was indifferent to cruelty. You assumed justice was a machine the wealthy could operate for their own purposes. Today you are going to encounter something that was evidently not part of your education." I turned to my bailiff. "Quinn, the file on Sterling Logistics labor violations, the one we pulled from the state archives this morning." The color drained from Sterling's face. The smirk vanished. You did not imagine I would walk into this hearing unprepared, did you? Ms. Miller is not the first person you have attempted to destroy. She may be the last. The folder landed on my desk. In that silence, it sounded like a gunshot. I began reading. May 2021, an employee fired for time theft because he spent 10 extra minutes on his lunch break injecting insulin. August 2021, a pregnant woman terminated 2 weeks before maternity leave, replaced 3 days later by a less expensive hire. Last month, deducting uniform costs from final paychecks and reducing wages below the federal minimum. This is not a business model, Mr. Sterling. It is a predation model. I employ thousands of people in this state, he said, his voice rising. I fuel the economy. You are selecting disgruntled individuals to misrepresent who I am. This is standard practice in the industry. Standard? Is it standard to treat human beings like batteries, drain them completely, and discard them when they stop producing? I turned to Sarah. Were you aware of these practices before this? Your Honor, we were afraid. There is a sign in the break room. If you do not want to be here, there are 10 people waiting outside for your position. They time bathroom breaks. More than 3 minutes is a recorded violation. 3 violations, and you are terminated. The day Emily became ill, I was already carrying 2 violations. I had taken a call from her physician the week before. A sound of disgust moved through the gallery. So you did not only leave because of a medical emergency, I said. You left knowing precisely what it would cost you. You understood you would be fired, and you went anyway. I had to, she whispered. She was calling for me. Mr. Sterling, you are suing this woman for $5,000 in training costs. Provide me with an itemized accounting of that investment. His lawyer shuffled documents, visibly unsettled. It is a flat administrative fee, Your Honor. Onboarding, human resources. Did she return her uniform? I asked Sarah. Yes, Your Honor. I washed it and brought it back the following day. So you are charging her a flat penalty presented as training costs, I said. In legal terms, that is a liquidated damages clause functioning as a punishment. And in this state, contract penalties designed purely to punish employees for leaving are unenforceable. Furthermore, you admitted that you fired her the moment she walked out. That means you severed the contract. You cannot sue for breach of an agreement. You terminated yourself in a moment of spite. She abandoned her post, Sterling said, slamming his hand on the table. I have a business to run. You think because you wear a robe you understand the real world? Softness is a liability. If I let this go, I look weak. Weakness. I allowed that word to occupy the room. You believe mercy is weakness? Compassion a liability? I see a mother who faced the potential loss of her child and chose love over fear. That is what genuine strength looks like. What I observe at that table is a man so fragile, so deeply insecure, that he requires destroying a minimum wage worker simply to feel substantial. Sterling stood and began buttoning his jacket. I have heard enough. Dismiss this and let me leave. I have a lunch reservation. He believed that was the end of it, that he would walk out, get in his car, and never think about Sarah Miller again. He was wrong. Sit down, Mr. Sterling. My voice filled the room in a way that left no room for misinterpretation. This case has not been dismissed, and you are not going to lunch. You brought this into my courtroom. You invoked the authority of this institution to pursue a vulnerable person. Well, the law is fully involved now, and it has questions for you that extend considerably beyond breach of contract. I turned to my bailiff. Quinn, secure the doors. Nobody leaves. Sterling looked around and appeared to register for the first time that his money had no value in this room. He was no longer the predator. This is false imprisonment, he said, reaching for his phone. I will contact the governor. I will have you removed from the bench. Call whoever you choose, I said, cutting through his panic cleanly. But until I am satisfied that justice has been properly served here, you are not walking out that door. And if that phone appears in your hand one more time, I will hold you in contempt and you will spend tonight in a cell. His lawyer whispered something urgent, and Sterling lowered the phone slowly. Good. Ms. Miller, Did you receive your final paycheck when you left? No, Your Honor. 2 weeks plus 20 hours of overtime. When I contacted Human Resources, they told me Mr. Sterling had ordered it held against the $5,000 he claimed I owed. How much was withheld? With the overtime, approximately $1,800. Mr. Sterling, are you aware that withholding a final paycheck over a disputed debt violates state labor law? You cannot simply decide someone owes you money and retain their wages. You need a court order. Did you obtain one? It is in the contract. She agreed. Contract language does not supersede statutory rights, I said, striking the desk. That clause is void. And by enforcing it, you did not merely breach an agreement, you committed wage theft. The word settled in the room. Theft. And for liquidated damages to be enforceable, they must represent a reasonable estimate of actual loss, not a penalty. What precisely does training a warehouse worker cost $5,000? Safety protocols, proprietary systems. Ms. Miller, how long was your training? A 4-hour video, Your Honor. A safety tape from the 1990s played in the break room. Then they gave us a vest and put us on the production line. A 4-hour video, I repeated. That is your $5,000 investment. This is not a training fee, Mr. Sterling. It is a trap. You offer employment, have people sign a document for an amount they cannot afford, and when they attempt to leave a toxic situation, you threaten to bankrupt them. This is indentured servitude with a corporate logo. I picked up the courtroom telephone and dialed on speaker. Who are you calling? Sterling demanded, beginning to shake. The Department of Labor and Training, I said. After that, the Attorney General's office. Because what I am looking at is no longer a civil dispute. It is a pattern of systemic fraud. And since you are under oath and have just admitted to illegally withholding wages, I believe they will want to hear it directly from you. His attorney shot to his feet. Your Honor, we move to dismiss with prejudice. We withdraw the suit immediately. Now you want to withdraw, I said, not replacing the receiver. Now that the light is on, you want to step back into the shadows. Too late. You do not get to terrorize a mother and then say, never mind the moment you are caught. The line connected. The attorney sat back down. Sarah, I said quietly, how much are Emily's medical bills? The deductible is $7,000. I do not have it. I was going to use my final paycheck to begin a payment plan so they would not halt treatment. But he kept it. $7,000 withheld from her to make a point. I will drop the $5,000 claim, Sterling said, his voice now hollowed out. Just end this. You believe the scales balance because you decided to stop swinging, I said. I hung up the phone. I will not call the Labor Department at this moment because I have an alternative in mind, one that is going to cost you something considerably more meaningful than a phone call. And it is going to require you to go somewhere you have never been and see something you have spent your entire career insulating yourself from. You have two options, Mr. Sterling. Listen very carefully. Behind door 1, I refer everything I have heard today to federal prosecutors. Your company comes under criminal investigation. Your name appears on a Department of Justice filing alongside words like wage theft, fraud, and conspiracy. Behind door 2, you accompany my bailiff to Hasbro Children's Hospital right now. You walk into that oncology ward. You sit in the chair next to Emily Miller's bed, and you stay there until you understand, genuinely understand, what you actually took from this family when you kept that paycheck. Which door? The drive was silent. Sterling sat in the back of the court vehicle, separated from his sedan and his entourage and his phone, a passenger for once in a reality he had spent his entire life engineering his way out of. At the oncology wing, he hesitated in the doorway. He passed children with bald heads and IV poles wrapped in stickers, parents asleep in chairs with exhaustion written into their faces, a father crying quietly near a vending machine, a mother reading aloud to a child who had not opened her eyes in days. For a man who had measured everything in efficiency, this place was something his framework had no language for. Then, room 402. Sarah did not wait. The moment the door opened, she was at the bedside. Mommy is here. Sterling stood frozen in the doorway. Emily was smaller than he had expected. Tubes connected her to machines producing a slow, rhythmic sound. Her skin was pale, the circles under her eyes deep, something fragile about her that conveyed the specific vulnerability of a body being repaired and repaired again. She opened her eyes. "Mommy, you came back?" "Of course I came back. I told you I would." "But your work," Emily whispered. "The boss, did you get in trouble?" A 4-year-old in a hospital bed, receiving chemotherapy, and her concern was whether her mother had angered the man who controlled their income. Sarah turned and looked at Sterling standing in the doorway. Silence. Just the steady beep of the monitor. Sterling stepped forward. He looked down at the child he had once categorized as operationally irrelevant. "No, Emily," he said, his boardroom voice gone entirely, replaced by something that had apparently been waiting beneath it for a very long time. "Your mommy is not in trouble. Who are you?" "I am Mr. Sterling. I am the boss." Emily's eyes went wide with fear. "I am sorry." "Mommy did not mean to leave. Please do not be angry." That response hit him physically. He reached for the bed rail to steady himself. His reputation had not remained contained in his office. It had filtered down through his managers and into the nightmare of a dying 4-year-old. "No," he said, and tears were filling his eyes. "I am not angry. I came here to tell you that your mommy is the best person who works for me." He looked at Sarah and saw her, perhaps for the first time. "I made a very serious mistake, Emily. Your mommy needed to be here with you, and I am going to make sure she can stay for as long as you need her." He reached into his pocket, not for the checkbook, and found the gold pen. "Do you like to draw?" She gave a small nod. "You can have this," he said, placing it in her hand. "I promise you, Emily, I am going to take care of everything. You just focus on getting well." He walked to the waiting area, sat down, put his head in his hands, and wept. Not because he had been caught, because he had looked at himself clearly and did not recognize the person he saw. People say character formed over a lifetime cannot be cracked open in a single afternoon. After all my years on this bench, I used to believe that too. I have watched too many defendants perform transformation at the railing only to revert the moment they reach the parking lot. Richard Sterling proved me wrong. Or perhaps he proved that even the most armored heart can still be reached if the right moment finds it. That night, he did not return to his mansion or make his reservation. He went directly to Sterling Logistics headquarters, found his legal team drafting a countersuit, walked to the industrial shredder, picked up the entire Sarah Miller file, and fed it in. Then he told his lawyers they were dismissed, his entire firm, effective immediately. 6 months later, I convened a follow-up hearing. When Richard Sterling walked into my courtroom this time, there was no entourage, no polished Italian suit. Modest business clothes, and a face that had changed in ways that could not be rehearsed. The arrogance was gone. Something quieter had replaced it. Walking beside him was Sarah Miller, a different person than the woman who had gripped the railing for support 6 months before. Rosy color in her face, her posture upright. "Your Honor," Sterling said before I could ask, his voice warm and without the old authority in it. "I am here to report on my commitment." He placed a folder on my desk, not legal documents, receipts and medical records. "Emily's total treatment cost to date is $452,000. We transferred her to a specialist center in Boston for advanced therapy. All travel and housing for the family has been covered in full. We have abolished the penalty clause for employees who leave the company. We created the Emily Fund, 5% of quarterly profits held for emergency assistance to any employee facing a family crisis. No employee will be terminated again for caring for a sick family member. That time is now paid leave at 75% wages." A murmur moved through the courtroom. "You know that reduces your margins," I said, testing him one final time. "What do your shareholders say?" He smiled, genuinely. "Net profit dropped 12% last quarter, Your Honor, but turnover has gone to zero. Productivity is up 20%, and for the first time in 10 years, I sleep through the night without medication. I will take that trade." "Ms. Miller," I said, "anything you would like to say?" Sarah stood, her eyes bright. When Mr. Sterling came to that hospital, I believed he was performing, but he came back every weekend. He did not only pay the bills, he sat with Emily so I could sleep. She calls him Uncle Rich. He saved my daughter's life in every sense of those words. Sterling looked at the floor, embarrassed by that title in the best possible way. The man who had once used the word cogs was now someone's Uncle Rich. Mr. Sterling, I said, 6 months ago you told me the law was black and white, that a contract was ironclad, that emotion had no place in business. Then the courtroom doors opened. Small, wearing a pink beanie over a bald head, holding Bailiff Quinn's hand, Emily walked in. The room went reverent. She moved down the center aisle, fragile and somehow filling the space entirely. She saw Sarah and smiled. Then she saw Sterling. He stood up without adjusting his tie or checking his watch. Just stood there with his hands at his sides, looking at her with something that had no word in his previous vocabulary. "Hi, Uncle Rich." "Hi, Emily. You look strong today." "I am. The doctor says my white blood cells are fighting like ninjas." Soft laughter moved through the room. "Young lady," I said, leaning over the bench, "do you know why you are here today?" "You are the judge," she said. "Mommy told me you were the one who made the bad things go away. We all worked on that together." She reached into her backpack and produced a drawing. Then Quinn lifted her so she could hand it to me directly. It was drawn in gold ink, the pen Sterling had given her. 3 stick figures under a bright sun, Emily, Sarah, and a figure in a tie holding a bag marked meds. "That is Uncle Rich," she said. "He is carrying my medicine." And in the clouds, a figure wearing a black robe. "That is you. You are watching." I had to take a moment. In all my years, I have received awards and plaques and formal recognitions. None of them carried the weight of this drawing made by a 4-year-old with a gold pen. It is beautiful, Emily. I am going to frame it. It is the finest evidence I have ever received.